Hello, this is Faith at Catholic Unschooling Coach, and I am coming to you on the Sunday of Memorial Day weekend. It's very chilly and rainy here. It's very unusual that the weather is like this. But anyway, my cat might hop up on the back of this chair any minute. But I thought I would talk about what you do all day as an unschooler. Because I think people kind of flail about once they don't have that structure that school and home provides. They really don't know what to do, and they want their kids, they read about how, their kids should lead and, natural learning and all this stuff. So they don't quite know what their role is anymore, and yet they're anxious. They want their kids to be learning. So, so I thought I would talk about what do you do? And again, I always say this, I was a Catholic unschooler, so my Catholicism framed my unschooling. And, we have this idea that we should try to be virtuous. And what is virtue? Virtue is the balance between two extremes, right? So you can be really gluttonous, or you can be, oops, that's my cat. He's acting really crazy right now. He's just running around. I'm afraid he's gonna attack me. Calm down. Anyway, or you could starve yourself, fast so much that, you basically starve yourself to death, which sometimes I think those medieval saints kind of did that. They went too far. They were overly scrupulous. But we want virtues, right? We want temperance as a balance. So we want those virtues. We don't want to go to extreme. And I think what can happen when you unschool, especially if you live in the first world, in the developed world, where you have all these conveniences, and you really could just idle away the day just playing video games or that sort of thing. That is not good. That is not virtuous. That's self-indulgent. That makes you very self-centered and, putting your own pleasure above anything else. And we don't want that. That doesn't develop a good character. So that doesn't lead us to holiness, that's not a good way to glorify God. Now, sometimes you might have some down days where you're not feeling well, or you've been through a lot and you're just taking a break. I mean, occasionally you can do stuff like that, but it shouldn't be the norm, I don't think. I don't think that's a good way to develop character. And again, radical unschoolers might say, well, they'll self-regulate, but I don't think so. I think, for example, video games are very addicting. And if you don't want to get out of bed in the morning, you don't want to get up, maybe you like sleeping in or whatever, maybe you don't, I think it becomes a bad habit and you don't want to get up and do things. So, it's easy to fall into bad habits. It really is. And so, so I think that as a Catholic unschooler, we have to provide this wholesome structure, the scaffold for the kids to use to support them as they grow in virtue and in good habits. And one way is definitely to model. Good, you look to yourself first. What do you do? Are you complaining and whining? Are you lazy? Do you indulge? Are you full of self-indulgences and that sort of thing? Well, you should try to be better. But also just managing a household of many people. You have different people doing different things, wanting to do different things, having, different tendencies and that sort of thing. So you have to manage, you have to manage different needs and wants as well. So what do you do all day? Well, for me, from my personal experience, I found that I liked to get up. We didn't necessarily get up at the same time. There might even have been at times like a 2-hour window when people would be up and moving around. If you have older kids, if you have teens, they want to sleep more. But then if you have younger kids, they might get up and want to do stuff. But at some point between, say, 7 and 9, or maybe 8 and 10, during some periods of our life, or even from day to day, like one day you might get up somewhere between 7 and 9, and the other day you might get up between 8 and 10 because you don't have something to go to that day, so you could sleep in a little bit. But what for me was have the same rhythm. So what do you do when you get up? Well, I had my kids eat breakfast, and some of them didn't like breakfast, so they had toast and a glass of juice or something like that. And others were hungry and they wanted to eat scrambled eggs and toast and have a glass of milk or something. But what we would do is we would sit down around the table, we would pray, I would read aloud to them. In the later years, we started watching like short videos, or we would listen to short snippets about the saints from Franciscan media. That was something we did quite a lot. We would watch little short educational videos on YouTube once we discovered YouTube. I know we did one from the University of Nottingham on the periodic table. I highly recommend it. It was really, really riveting. We really enjoyed that one. But sometimes my kids would pick out something. They really liked this video, this channel, Vsauce, I think. There was a bunch of them. There was like John Green. These are my teens, So we would do something like that, or I would find something, and we didn't do it every day, but often we watched a short video together. We would try to pray together, and our prayer varied too. A lot of times we did lauds. That was my idea. Or sometimes I would get the magazine, for a few years I got the magazine, The Word Among Us, and I would read the readings for the day. If it was a sacramental year, often I would find some sort of book that, taught about that sacrament. I had a few that I liked, and I would read that. Sometimes we would quiz each other. That was kind of fun, depending on how awake we were. But usually I tried to do religion and prayer and then some kind of interesting thing. Often I would do some other thing, like maybe a historical fiction or some sort of entertaining biography or something like that. Read a little bit of that. That was just around the table. And I did that. I started that habit because for a long time I had little kids in high chairs, so I would like give them Cheerios while I was reading to the older kids. So I found that they were already captive right around the table, so then I would read to them. And I would usually, I'm an early riser, so I would be up earlier, and I would have already eaten anyway, so I didn't need to sit and eat. And then a few years in, we discovered that my oldest son was dysgraphic, and he had to go get very expensive because our insurance didn't cover it. Physical therapy, occupational therapy. It was occupational therapy for learning to write. And they tested him, and he had like a college level vocabulary. He had really high analytical skills, but he could not, and I knew he was behind in the handwriting bit, and I kept trying to encourage him, but it didn't work because he needed more. But he was like, I think his handwriting skills were like beginning second grade. This was when he was, I think, 7th grade. Yeah, so that was bad. So he was in physical therapy, or occupational therapy rather, for a year. Not a whole year, like a school year, about the length of a school year. It was such a transformation for him. He went from a kid who did not have a lot of confidence to having a lot of confidence. It really was something he needed. And so my husband, because it was so expensive, said, we need to practice. Like, my husband was 100% behind on schooling. He thought it was a really cool idea. He wasn't for high school, which turned out to be just fine for our family. So that didn't become a conflict. But he said, no, we got to practice handwriting. If this is something we can't do, we want our kids to be literate and be able to write. So we started doing copy work around the table. Now, I had tried to do copy work now and again. I got them penmanship books to try to teach them to write, but I never stuck to it. But this I stuck to. So we would do copy work So for the little ones, or if it was a real little one, like a 4-year-old, basically they would just draw a picture, and then, you know, maybe I get them a really early penmanship or a handwriting book that they could do, like from Kumon or something like that. Or I would get them a little copybook, you know, one of those, what do they call them? You know, they're sewn and they have like the dotted line, and it would have space for writing a picture, or drawing a picture. So they would draw a picture of something that they wanted to, like maybe whatever I was reading out loud. And then I would say, tell me a word that you want, you know, what's going on in the picture. Give me a word. And then I would dot out the word and then help them write it correctly. So that was like the earliest ones. And then they would do penmanship books sometimes, which can be awfully similar to copy books. And then they went from that to me just having a template for them to look at and just freehand copying. This was hard for them because they had trouble with their eyes. But one of the first things they liked to copy was a book of jokes. They really thought that was fun. So like 7 or 8, they were copying over jokes. And then they would copy over lines from a book I was reading, or we learned a little bit of Latin that way. We would copy over Latin prayers. We would copy over poetry. We would copy over quotes. You know, so that's what we did. And then when they got older into high school, or you know, middle school years and high school, then it would be more like a commonplace book where they were definitely copying passages from the Bible, or quotes from saints or things like that. So we did do that formally. So every morning we would gather at some point within about a 2-hour window around the breakfast table. Some would eat, others maybe not so much. Maybe they would just have something little. And then we would pray and read, maybe watch a video, do some copy work. And then we would kind of scatter. And people could do what they wanted during that time, except I discouraged screen. I didn't want them to do screen in the morning. So they would go play outside, they would go play with their toys, they'd go play, you know, build something with their Legos, they would go off and read, you know, they play a game or whatever, they were just playing. At some point, we would have a tidy up time and lunch. Sometimes during that morning period, I would do a one-on-one lesson if I was working on somebody learning to read. Or if I had older kids that were taking outside classes, they might sit down and do their homework because maybe the next day they had a co-op class, or maybe the next day their math tutor was coming, or their math tutor was coming that afternoon, and so they needed to do something. So sometimes they would have stuff like that. Or for instance, my daughter was in the American Heritage Girls, and she might be working on a badge, and so she might decide to go work on that. So it just varied, but people were generally busy. And then there would be a tidy up time. And sometimes the house would be such a mess, or I'd need to do something. And so we would actually focus on cleaning up something, or I would have to run errands. And so we would pile into the car and run errands, whatever. I mean, it was kind of loose at that point. And then we usually gathered for lunch, and I would also read over lunch. And usually that was sort of history or science, something like that. Sometimes I would teach little lessons, like I would decide that it was important to teach long division, or I would decide that it was important to teach some grammar or something like that. And I would have a few weeks, or maybe if we were studying for end of the year standardized tests, we might do a short lesson over the lunch table. And then I usually would read to the little ones, like picture books afterwards. And then everyone would go into quiet time. And they would go into their rooms, and the little napper, the ones that were still napping, I would put down for a nap. And the others would listen to audiobooks. That was the big thing. Sometimes the older ones would just read, or sometimes they would get together and play a game. They're like Rummy Cube. I remember was really they really liked that game for a while. My oldest two would play that. Yeah, and quiet time, I'm an introvert, and I would just be like touched out by that point. And often I have a baby with me anyway that I was nursing. And so I would lie down often with a baby or a toddler, just to try to lose consciousness. That was my goal, just lose consciousness for a couple of minutes. And then I could wake up and I'd be all groggy, and I would stumble to the kitchen and make a cup of tea, but then I would sort of revive and get a second wind. Sometimes during that period, I would try to work with an older kid, or I would try to, if it usually was an older kid then, because the younger ones stayed in quiet time longer. And then when quiet time was over, it just depended. Sometimes we had to go out to something like our American Heritage Girls, or a music lesson, or an art lesson, or a play date, or maybe errands. Or sometimes we would that's when they could watch TV and play video games. It just depended. But that was sort of what we did then. And then around dinner time, when I was trying to make dinner, and also that depended, because if we were out, then I would try to do something like a slow cooker or something that was really quick to make when we got home. And then by that time I was really falling apart. But I didn't read out over dinner. We would just eat dinner, and then we would just clear the table. But and this is true confessions, I'm really bad at cleaning the kitchen at night. I just sort of try to load the dishwasher and run it, and then all the pots and pans I would just soak in the sink, and I would clean it in the morning because I'm an early riser, and I would get up and I'd clean it in just a few minutes, whereas if I would try to do it at night. But sometimes my kids would help too at night if we really needed to get done at night. Anyway, and then we might do a few little chores, another tidy up, put the laundry away, something like that. And then, it was sort of kind of more free time. But sometimes the kids would be working on something if they had something going on. And my husband would get home. Now, he traveled a lot, so there would be long periods of time where he wouldn't be around, or he'd be working late. But he tried to get home enough that it was sort of a regular thing that he would read aloud to the kids, and he really, really loved that part of it. So he would read literature, and we took turns. Like sometimes we'd go through a period where my job was to put the littles to bed. I would read, give them a bath, read them some stories, put them to bed, and he would read to the older ones. And then sometimes we'd switch, and I'd be reading something to the older ones, and he would be taking care of the little ones. So it just sort of moved in and out like that. So that's the way a typical day went. I mean, there was just sort of a loose rhythm, and what we did was directed a lot by just what outside activities we had signed up for, or play dates, or what everyone was doing that year. Like I always try to have. For many years, not throughout all 22, we were involved in co-ops, various co-ops. We had, when I first homeschooled, we had a co-op that met twice a month. That was just extracurricular activities. So there was like a book club, there was a Saints club, there was a Jason project, which was a science thing that you could sign up for. There was a PE class, there was a music class, there was a, it was just whatever different moms could say that they could do, and then you would just sign up for whatever. You would usually have a choice of two things. It met from 9. We'd go to the 9 o'clock mass on Fridays, and then the co-op lasted from 10 to 12, and it was just these fun extracurricular things. And that went on for 8 years, but then we lost that space. So we moved to another church And we tried to continue the same thing, but it was a different layout. And halfway through, there was some sort of insurance crisis where they were nervous about, I don't know, there was for some reason. So for several years, we didn't have a co-op. However, we had a lot of clubs. We had the, what's the boys club? The Catholic Boys Club. Different moms would try to do that. I can't remember the name of it now. It's kind of the, the parallel to the, oh my goodness, I can't remember. The St. Teresa Club. I can't remember now what it was. This was for my older daughter. And so we would have those. We'd have clubs. There was a chess club once a week that we joined. There was a lady who gave art lessons to homeschoolers, so that was a thing to go to. And then for a long time, this group of women that had been in this co-op, we were on Yahoo. We had a Yahoo group, so people would set up like tennis lessons. That was a big thing that we did every fall and spring, or swimming lessons, or soccer lessons, or they would have playground dates, like if the weather was above such and such degree and it wasn't going to rain, let's meet we had 2 parks that we would alternate between. So then we would have a play date, and then people would plan field trips. So there would be field trips, and sometimes people would host an activity, like almost every Valentine's Day. Somebody would have a big party, and people would go and make Valentines and run around and play. We always had an opening. For September 8th, it was Mary's birthday, and so we always had a picnic on that day at this one particular park that had a sprinkler. It's really a fun park, so the kids would, usually September 8th around here, it's still hot, so that was always really fun, and the kids would bring muffins or cupcakes, and they'd make a rosary, and we'd say a rosary in the park. So we had certain things that the group tended to do. We had one woman, many years, she was incredible. She is incredible still, she's still around. But she made these marionettes to tell the story of Our Lady of Guadalupe. And she would host this puppet show. And the homeschool kids got to help, because she needed a lot of assistance. It was huge. The set was huge, and she would use the whole activity room at her parish. So that was fun. So that was like something that we did every December. We had the marionette show for Our Lady of Guadalupe. So there were certain things that just went on. There would be some sort of end of year picnic. So it was the Mary's birthday. We have often an All Saints party. There was one particular parish that would host one that we would go to. So there was an All Saints party, there was the Our Lady of Guadalupe party, there was the Valentine's party. And then, I don't know, things got really loose, but then there would be the end of the year thing. So that sort of gave us, kind of a rhythm to go through the year as well. Anyway, so the way you do it is you just, for me anyway, I mean, I can't tell you, because it's really unique to every single family. You might not have a group around you that you can do stuff like that with, or you might be working from home and you don't have, everyone's got a different situation. You might live out on a farm, and that sort of directs everything. I'm in the suburbs, but having a rhythm so that everyone in the family knows what to expect, and having a general rhythm of the year so that they know these things are going to come up. And of course, you've got the liturgical year also that gives you structure. That made it so that we knew what we were doing. We weren't just free. When we were too idle, I would say my kids were free falling. They just fell apart. They didn't know which end was up. So we needed some structure, which was good. It was hard to find the balance. It was a constant process trying to find a good balance. But that's how we did it. So I would take our outside activities that we always wanted to participate somewhat in some our outside activities, plug that into our schedule. And then every day we have these read alouds. We did our copy work. then then you have responsibilities or whatever for your outside activities. Then you had your own, your play dates and your own things that you were really into. I remember my middle son went through a long period where he was really into Bionicles. And he would read those books, and then he would build all over his room, like just these elaborate battles, and he just spent hours doing that sort of thing. So they'll do their own thing that way too. So anyway, I hope this helps. I've talked for 25 minutes. That's ridiculous. I wish I knew how to edit. I would edit more so that I'm not so verbose. Anyway, I hope that helps you, and happy learning. Bye.